wants to go live. All right. Okay. I think we are live. YouTube is giving me the green light. Um, Michael, Tacey, I'm glad to have you guys here. Um, for those who are tuning in or who will be tuning in at some point in this live stream, uh, this is kind of a last minute get together hangout. We have a very special guest here. You guys all know Michael. You know, he's here from time to time, and so we're glad to have him here. But our special guest today is Tacey. Tacey,
So,
you are a recently returned missionary
yep.
for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You served a pretty interesting mission, one that I think a lot of people would kill for. Um, and so we're gonna just kind of hang out. We're This is gonna be story hour, I guess. We're just gonna kind of poke and prod Tacey to give us some of her funnest stories and things from her missionary experience. But if you clicked on the video, you saw the thumb title. You know this is about church history sites like those in Nauvoo and neighboring areas. And so, Tacey, why don't you take it away? Tell us a little bit about yourself and the areas that you served in, and then maybe we can start talking about some of those cool stories and things that you want to bring up. And for those in the audience listening, if you have a question, if you have a comment, or you want to share something about church history sites or something that would be fun and add to the conversation, please do so in the live chat. We'll appreciate it. So with that, Tacey, why don't you give us a little bit of background, who you are and what areas you served in?
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm Tacey, born and raised in Arizona. Love this place. It's nice and warm. 21 now, and I got to serve in the Illinois Historic Sites. That's what my mission was called on the paper. So that was Nauvoo and Carthage area, like you were saying. But in the wintertime, I got the opportunity to serve in do a proselyting mission, I guess you'd say, instead of a historic site mission. So I got to serve in the New Jersey Morristown mission, and that was super fun. And then I got to come back to the historical sites and finish.
Awesome. Was it difficult sort of transitioning between proselyting and doing the historic sites? Was that a difficult transition when you moved from place to place, or did you find it kind of refreshing to get
Mhm.
a change of pace? Or what was that like?
For me, it was refreshing. I was there right before we call it our outbound. So when we go out and proselyte in a different state, it was kind of the dead season. So I was losing my mind in Heber C. Kimball's home because we had two people come in the span of like 8 hours. So I was losing my mind. And so that transition was nice to go from wanting to be busy to being busy. But I actually had a hard time coming back to Nauvoo. I didn't want to, but when I got there, I got super excited again. I knew that's where I needed to finish off my mission. But the transition wasn't for me personally too bad. I was just like, all right, it's just missionary work, but in a different way. Um, but I guess it's a lot different because in Nauvoo and Carthage, you serve from 9 to 5, unless the hours are different for like winter time and stuff. But yeah, just be there 9 to 5, and then after 5, we don't go out and proselyte. We're not proselyting missionaries in that area, and so we would just find things to keep busy, whether that be personal study, comp study. Sometimes we'd have meetings as a whole mission, do that kind of stuff, and then of course went over to Jersey, and it was that normal 9 to 9 proselyting mission. So it's kind of different, but it was really good.
How did you like Jersey?
Oh my gosh, I loved that place. I was in the same area, all 4 transfers, and I was in the city kind of area. We were living right outside of Newark, and that's where our church chapel or our chapel was as well. And so I just got to meet tons of people every day. I got to street contact a ton. That was my favorite. Um, but it was really good. And something that I'm really grateful for serving in Nauvoo and Carthage first is I was able to take the testimony I really gained of Joseph Smith and bring it over to New Jersey and teaching people about that. And one of or some of my most powerful, I guess, teaching moments I had in Jersey was when I got to share the first vision with people. So that was like my favorite thing of getting to take Nauvoo over to people and be able to teach them about them.
Well, and you kind of had a leg up because you could talk about the history in a way that a lot of people can't.
Yeah.
So take me back to your mission call. You receive your mission call, and it says, what does it say? It says
Illinois historic
Illinois
sites.
historic sites. So
Mhm.
what's going through your mind when you read that letter?
I didn't know that we had historical sites in Illinois. Never heard of Nauvoo or Carthage. I guess I probably heard of Carthage at some point, but I only knew the word Illinois. So I was super bummed. I was like, what? I could go anywhere and I'm getting sent to Illinois. And then everybody that knew where I was actually going was like, oh, that's the coolest thing. You're gonna love that place. It's so awesome. There's horses. You get to do like different work on the grounds and you get to like basically live in the historic homes teaching people about them. I was like, oh, this actually sounds pretty good. And then I got super excited about it and loved it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I served in Southern California,
Okay.
so I did not go too far. We can't all be like Michael here and go overseas and learn new language and all that fun stuff. Um, but I remember receiving my call. I'm sure Michael does too, and sort of the just flood of emotions that kind of overcome you a little bit when you receive your first call and you're reading that letter. Um, Now I had known when I served my mission that there were people who got to serve in historic sites, having been to a few of them myself, but I had no idea that young 20-year-old, 19-year-old missionaries could serve in these historic sites because my only experience was a gray-haired old couple, very sweet, would come up to you and take you through the different rooms of a building and talk about all the fun stuff and whatever. But um, this was kind of new to me, even as a missionary myself, that there are a lot of young proselyting missionaries who also do transition over and take care of the actual sort of church history work on the ground, doing tours and cool stuff like that. And you actually got to do that. So when you first get out into the mission field as a what did you call yourselves, like historic site missionaries or
Site,
what?
yeah, site missionaries. You can call it historic site missionaries, but we just said site missionaries.
So what was your first experience like getting out there and actually like boots on the ground, figuring out how this works, the lay of the land, all of that? What was that like?
So the first day we actually got there, we kind of have a little bit, they changed it a little bit now, but when I got there, you had like 2 to 3 days of kind of training in a sense. So kind of like the MTC, but there. And so they talk to us, they tell us you need to watch out for these kinds of bugs. Here's how you would like kind of give a tour and everything, and just like kind of teaching us that stuff. But then they allow or brought us to different places. Like we have a sewing room over there because they make our pioneer dresses over there. So they'd stop us over there. But I remember getting dropped off over there, and I think they forgot to pick up my group. And I was so turned around, I had no idea where I was. So that was kind of my first experience in Nauvoo, but I got to know it better. And the first day I actually got to serve in the sites was at the tinsmith. So there's a little tinsmith on Main Street, and I just watched my trainer give the tour a couple of times to people coming in, and then she just asked if I wanted to do it, and I was like, sure. And so I did, and that's kind of how my first experience was, just getting right into it, and which is helpful for me because that's how I learn, is somebody showing me and then me just doing it. So I don't know. I just loved it from the first day. It was awesome.
How many like actual buildings or sites, I guess, are there in this mission that you would cover? And did you kind of have were you kind of localized to a specific site or maybe a few sites, or did you kind of have a good rotation through a number of them?
Yeah, so we have a Google Docs that's shared with the whole mission with all the site missionaries, and it tells you where you'll be that day. So it switches every single day. So you could be at Joseph Smith's homestead, And then you could end up on the other side of town at Sarah Granger Kimball's home, or even end up at Jonathan Browning's gunsmith shop and things like that. So it switched every day, and there's probably a little under 30 sites that I think there's more attractions you can or places you can actually see. But the places that missionaries were in actively giving tours, I think it was almost 30 different buildings.
That's pretty cool.
It's a
But
lot.
yeah, that is a lot. Michael, you and I haven't talked about this really. Have you been to some of these sites in Nauvoo and Carthage
Nope.
and okay.
Not
So
a person. This is why I was attracted to the conversation, because um, there's a lot of people that never take the time. They think that they know things. And talking to Tacey, hearing her homecoming talk, I've learned things every time. I'm going to learn things today. And as you know, Jacob, like, we kind of nerd out on this stuff, and yet there's these little details that, because she was there, she brings forward. And there's just a lot of fun, like, uh, interesting sparks, I would say, because then it could get you on a whole new, like, chase down a rabbit hole. I think with so much of this, it's just a lot to take in. Um, I would challenge even the nerdiest of nerds who like this stuff to know as much as a site missionary ends up knowing about these sites. And I'd love to see like a Steven Smoot versus a Tacey Chalk. You know, not that you know who Steven is, but like, like, have these people like understand there's so much depth there, right? Um,
Mhm.
and the other thing is the folklore that's around it, because you get a lot of stories and you don't know how true or not true it is. And so then from Tacey, I'm learning the church's perspective on how the church wants us to talk about these things, and kind of think about them, understand them better. So that part is also really fascinating. It doesn't mean you have to disbelieve something that maybe the church says is questionable or likely didn't but happen or something, but it gives you a better perspective into realizing how human the experience is.
yeah. So Tacey, you had mentioned that when you received your call, like Nauvoo, Carthage, like these were kind of nebulous terms to you. You weren't super familiar. You probably, it sounds like, hadn't been there yourself. Have you been to other church history sites before, or is this like totally brand new experience throwing you into this?
Brand new experience. I didn't realize like those were places that the church had. So brand new for me.
Um, at some point I'd love to go back, but I had been with my family when I was in high school. We went to Nauvoo and we were there for about a week or so, and we kind of bounced around Nauvoo, and we went to Carthage and my mom's from Chicago, so we stayed in Chicago for a while. But that was the first time that I had ever been to a church history site uh, at all. And so um, I remember being, I think I was 16 at the time, and not paying attention to any of it. All I could remember is how small the houses were, and just like how small these rooms were, and like how low some of the ceilings were, and especially like the jail and um some of these rooms, and just being like incredibly grateful that I live in a modern size house.
Yeah.
uh and so, but other than that, I don't remember a ton of like the information and the things that we were learning on the tours. So even for me, this conversation, Tacey, is going to be a big help in refreshing my memory on a lot of stuff that I've completely forgotten. Um, I mean, other than the mosquitoes and the humidity, I don't remember having a wonderful time as a punk 16-year-old kid listening to death metal. That was the church history sites was not my first choice for an awesome family vacation, right? So
Yeah.
that wouldn't have been me at 16 years old. Um, but I want to I want to kind of go back through memory lane a little bit, and you're going to help me. Um, so I want to kind of maybe get some of your own stories, your insights, and talk about some of the sites that really made church history come alive for you, because conversations like this, um I think are needed. I would love to go back to visit the church history sites, but I know there's a lot of members of the church. Michael's already talked about this, that they've never been. It's very hard to conceptualize just what it was like for these people, uh, our ancestors, our the early church leaders, and those who went through all of the things that we read about in church history. It's hard to conceptualize exactly what that looks like when you haven't been there. So I was wondering, Tacey, if you had to start this tour somewhere and you were going to bring a friend or somebody who is totally unfamiliar with the story of the restoration, and you were going to start them somewhere, what site would you take them to, and what would you really hope to convey in that walk?
Yeah. Um, Honestly, it's always been my favorite one, but starting at Joseph Smith's home. We gained those properties right when I started my mission, and it instantly became one of my favorites. But there's so much that happened there. It's where the prophet lived. It's where they like eh, what am I trying to say? In that home specifically, we get to talk about how eternal families was revealed in Nauvoo, and that's where we talk about it at. And just down the road, is Joseph Smith's store, and that's where that revelation was dictated. Doctrine and Covenants 132, that families had the opportunity to be together forever, and it's such a special thing to be able to bring them in and teach them about that. Do you kind of want me to go into the stories that we talk about there as well?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Okay, awesome. Um, I guess to kind of give you a visual too, the first home you come to is his first home when they first got there, in 1839. And so their home is actually facing the river because Joseph Smith, he liked to go and welcome people in that were coming from all parts of the world from the river. And so it's kind of neat to picture all the saints that would be coming up the Mississippi River, and the prophets just waiting to bring them in, just so loving and everything. Um, and then you get to bring them inside their home in the same space that Joseph, Emma, and their family were walking in, and tell them more about how loving Joseph and Emma were. The first story that we tell people about in there is when the saints first got there, the mosquitoes, like you were talking about, got the saints really sick with malaria during that time. And so Joseph and Emma gave up their home and used it as a hospital for the saints. They stayed in a tent in the yard, in their backyard for 3 months as they took care of all the saints. Um, and
Wait,
so,
let me pause you, Casey. I have a question. This is
yes.
one of the things I chased a little bit because you mentioned the malaria at the 3 months. So
Mhm,
Brigham Young's journal has an
mhm.
excerpt, and I think I grabbed it. Hold on, let me look. I think I grabbed this um, about that time. Okay, I'm going to read this quote. You tell me if this is folklore, truth, or something else. Okay, this is Brigham Young's journal, History of Brigham Young, pages 34 to 35. On July 22nd, 1839, Joseph arose from his bed of sickness, and the power of God rested upon him. He commenced in his own house and dooryard, commanding the sick in the name of Jesus Christ to arise and be made whole. And they were healed according to his word. He then continued to travel from house to house and went from tent to tent upon the bank of the river, healing the sick as he went. He walked into the cabin where I was laying sick and commanded me in the name of Jesus Christ to arise and be made whole. I arose and was healed. I followed him and the brethren of the 12. His voice was as the voice of God. When by the power of God granted unto him, Joseph had healed all the sick, he returned to his home. This was a day never to be forgotten. And I'll add, if I remember this correctly, Joseph was sick the whole time and was the last to get better, is the way I think I remember that. That's not what I grabbed, but if I remembered the story from when I had heard it a long time ago, that Joseph did this all while he was sick, because he got sick too while sleeping in the tent outside. Did all of
Mhm.
that, drains him. He goes in his house and he wakes up better later. But he did all of
Mhm.
that healing of, and this isn't in the Brigham Young account, but what I remember being told, like as a kid, was that it was over 200 people. And
There
so,
was, yeah.
yeah,
No, yeah, there was lots. And I love that you found that from Brigham Young because I didn't even know that existed. That's
oh,
like one of my favorite parts of that as well, that story. Because yeah, Joseph ended up getting sick too. For 3 weeks, he was like bedridden. And after that 3 weeks, he just felt well enough from what we know to basically stand. So still very sick. And he did exactly what you said. He said, "We are going to go and take care and bless these saints through God's priesthood power and authority." And so he went around in his home around Nauvoo and across the river to Montrose, Iowa, those surrounding cities or towns, and just blessed the saints and people that were sick and just did that. Like, I don't know if that was a whole day. I don't know how long that took, but that's all they dedicated their time to after he felt well enough. And he grabbed all the elders that were feeling well enough to come with him to also bless the saints. And so, such a cool story to be able to share there and that it happened in their home.
and that you get a, like, if you go to the site, you get to be there and your witness getting bit by mosquitoes apparently still today, from what Jacob said,
Yes.
right? And so you understand exactly how that would have happened, I guess. Like they drained the swamp, but I guess the mosquitoes never left.
Hmm. Exactly. Still
Yeah,
there,
they need to
still
get on
biting
that.
today.
Yeah,
The mayflies are worse now. I don't know if you guys have heard of those.
I've heard of them, but I've never experienced them, and I'm glad I haven't.
They're
So
so nasty.
Yeah, I'm good.
yeah.
It's so funny. But yeah, I loved getting to share that story in there. It's so special, and the spirit is just like it just comes in and it's so strong once you start sharing that. And then you get to tell people how he, after that summer, sent the core and the 12 apostles back off on missions. And he also went to Washington, D.C. I don't know if a lot of people know that. That was kind of his mission to go and try and receive recompensation for the things the Saints lost in the Missouri time, or at least ensure that none of that would happen again. Um, but that must have been kind of discouraging for Joseph because the president or whoever the candidate that he talked to at that time, I believe it was the president, sorry, I'm trying to remember. But he's basically like, I can't help you because if I do, then Missouri's going to go against me. And so that must have been so hard to have that answer come from somebody that's supposed to protect you. Um,
That's
but
politics, baby.
yeah, I know. But I love that he still took it as an opportunity to do something because along the way he was able to teach people about the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. And he was able to bring that light and that joy into their lives. And I'm sure that brought more people over with them and was able to bless their families because he made that journey. Um, and I got to share this with you guys. It's a little sappy, but it's one of my favorite things that you can really see into Joseph and Emma's relationship. While he's away on that trip for probably about 3 months, that's a long time to be away from your family. No phones, no email, nothing. You got to send a letter. And this is one of the letters that he wrote to her. He says, "My dear and beloved wife, I feel very anxious to see you all once more in this world. The time seems long that I am deprived of your society. I pray God to spare you all until I get home. My dear Emma, my heart is entwined around you and those little ones. I want you to remember me. Tell all the children that I love them and will come home as soon as I can. Yours in the bonds of love, your husband." I love getting to share that with people because it helps, at least it helped me to understand he's not just this huge prophet that was called to restore the gospel of Jesus Christ. He was a husband, he was a father, and he loved his family and he loved the saints that were coming in, and they were just a friend to everybody. Um, And something I didn't mention at first, but Emma, while her husband was sick with malaria and everything, she was taking care of her family, her husband, and all those saints during that time. And I love that you get to see her character come out too and how much she suffered through as well. I feel like we don't get to hear a ton about her, but she is an awesome woman, and I love getting to learn about her.
And
Um,
this is like, I wonder, because this is before the Relief Society's formed by 2.5 or so years or more,
mhm,
right? So I wonder if this is like that kind of preparatory period for that as well, something that allows the church to see the need and then start to come up. So much of Revelation and restoration is very much like the brother of Jared. What would you have me do? And he has to go back and he
mhm,
has to think about it. And then he brings the stones forward, right? And touch them with your fingers and all that. So it's kind of like, what would you have us do? And inspiration comes by way of almost necessity. And so they're bringing all the saints in. Emma's trying to do all she can. She's getting stretched thin. Anyone else that's trying to do so. What then is the innovation by necessity? And what's revealed is, the Relief Society. We could talk about that in a bit. I don't want to stop you, but I think it's like,
mhm.
if you can see things in this pattern, it really helps to set up how the restoration unfolds, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it serves as like a catalyst for what would become the developing process of revelation for the Relief Society.
Yeah.
I think of it similar to how like the March at Zion's camp was like a preparatory period for preparing those who would eventually be called to the 12 and so
Mm-hmm.
forth. There's kind of a lot of that parallel going on. Um, but I, I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong here, I'm assuming a lot of people who come to the church history sites are Latter-day Saints uh, looking to experience a little taste of like what it was like for Joseph and Emma or the early saints in Nauvoo and other places. Um, and I'm kind of curious because so much of this is centered in Nauvoo. Obviously, Carthage is a big part of the story as well, and we have church history sites there. Um, but at the same time, there's a lot of there's many years of like backstory that leads the saints to this place. Um,
Mhm.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your experience has been teaching people a little bit about the history of the church, leading them to eventually come and settle in Nauvoo, and maybe um, how you guys have been taught and trained to handle questions about church history, about Missouri, about some of the things that happened there, and what would eventually lead them to Nauvoo, and how you guys
Mhm.
handle some of those conversations.
Yeah. So I think I said this. We did or at the other podcast we did. My mission president was the best. He was awesome, and he actually went through and got something approved through. I think it was Bednar. He actually ended up talking to get it approved. But we did immersion trips. So we actually took small groups of us young sister missionaries out of the sites, and for 2 days, 1 to 2 days, we actually went to other church history sites. So we went to Liberty Jail, we went to Adamondiaman, we went to Hans Mill, we went to some of the far west Missouri sites and things like that. And we even went as far as to winter quarters. So our mission president, he was able to make it to where we could actually go and live that history, understand it, and learn it from those missionaries and be able to connect it back to Nauvoo and going out. And so that's how I was able to learn that history coming in and going out and being able to relate it to people because a lot of times too, all these families are going on like full church history trips, starting in Palmyra and all that and coming over. So they'd be like, oh, we just came back from Adamondiam. I'm like, oh my gosh, we just went there. How did you guys like it? And being able to relate the history to, I guess, where we're at now because we were able to go on those immersion trips.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
We never did anything fun like that.
It was really cool and it helped me to understand it even more too. So that was really cool for us.
I
Yeah.
did, Jacob. I did get a vacation for a week in Latvia on
Oh
my
yeah,
vacation.
Oh,
That's totally different than learning church history. But
it's
yeah.
awesome.
I mean, I
Uh,
did serve in the Tongan wards, so that was
that's
kind of
cool.
like a its own little experience.
That
Um,
is awesome.
but yeah, I think sometimes even myself included, I maybe get my timeline incorrect here and there of what's going on in church history, where are the saints at any given moment. As we're reading through the Doctrine and Covenants, I have a few other resources that I pull up, and I have to check and be like, okay, what's happening here, what's happening there, to try and contextualize what I'm reading in the Revelations, in the Doctrine and Covenants, um, and so having some of that firsthand experience seeing these sites and getting to like place the time periods with these, with this home. This was Joseph and Emma's first home in Nauvoo, and this is where they ended up, and stuff like that. That this is um this is an area that I am a total like what's the word? I am not very savvy when it comes to church history. My area of interest lies in other things, and so I'm constantly having to remind myself about dates and places and things like that. So one of selfishly one of the reasons I wanted to have you on as well as for my own benefit to help me kind of place things. But getting back to your mission experience, so being the bulk of the time, I'm assuming you were in Nauvoo. Um you had mentioned you get to serve in a bunch of other places and go on these sort of excursions to other church history sites. And I'm wondering, outside of Nauvoo or outside of the main sites that you spent your time in, what was your favorite?
Like out of all the sites I served in, or sorry.
Well, let's go beyond your immediate mission. Some of the other sites that you got to spend time in, whether it's
Oh,
Adamandiaman or whatever. What one do you have some of the like fondest memories of, or which site did you think was just the coolest?
yes. Sorry, I totally missed that question. Um, for me personally, it was the two places that had literally just grass and trees, and that was Adamandiaman and Hans Mill. Um, going to those sites, the spirit was just, it was, I would relate it to the temple. Being in there, that's how those places felt. Even though there was nothing, it was just all grass. It was just so special and you could feel it. And it was a place that I personally was able to receive like personal revelation for things that I was having questions on. And it was just, it was sacred ground and it still is, but it was so special to be there and to feel that, even though there was nothing there that should have made it special. And that's how you just know that something happened there or something will happen there. Even at Hans Mill, such a terrible thing that happened there. And it should be a really sad place, but the spirit was peaceful and so strong. We got to have a testimony meeting there, just bearing witness of all the sites we were able to go to, and things that we had learned from them, and about our Savior and how the saints were able to find them in those really hard times, like Hans Mill and everything.
Yeah, I would love to go to Adamandiaman. My wife knows some people from the ward that she grew up in, who served as like groundskeepers
Hmm.
for Adamandiaman. And they had a wonderful experience. They loved it. So that is definitely one place that's like on my bucket list. I'd love to visit. Um, but bringing this back, uh, so we're starting in Joseph and Emma's first home along the Mississippi. Where's our next stop? Where are we going, Tacey? You're
Next
driving the car.
stop. Oh, let's see. There's so many good places you could go to. If you only have a little bit of time, we always recommend the Joseph Smith property. So that also includes the Red Brick store, which is literally just down the walkway from his home. But there, that's where the Relief Society was actually formed. That's where the first full endowment was received and given. And it's also where the priesthood keys were turned over to the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. The information that they needed, everything was given to the Quorum of the 12 Apostles during the period of 1844 before Joseph Smith's death. And so it's such like a special place and being able to tell people about that and to be able to testify too that those keys they did not leave the earth because Joseph was able to give the Quorum of the 12 Apostles those keys, and that we have a living prophet who leads and guides our church with that same power and authority today, and with those same keys. And it's so special to be able to testify of that, um, and especially of the Relief Society, how it still impacts people all over the world today, and especially the endowment. I loved getting to teach people about that in there because I feel like we don't talk much about it, but we get to in there and teach them that, especially when non-members would come in, we could tell them like this is the plan of redemption or the plan of happiness, and we would be able to be straight up with them. You learned about, or you get to learn about the creation of the world. You get to learn about the atonement of Jesus Christ in your life here on the earth and how you're able to make it through it because of our Savior. And that our Heavenly Father, even back in the 1840s, loved us so much that He wanted us to have that extra power. And He knew we would need that to get through our life. And He knew those saints would need it to make that journey west. I have no idea how they did that, but they knew they needed that power to be with them as well. Um, and with that, really quick, this is a different home, but Brigham Young's home, it's closed right now for refurbishment. But we got to tell this wonderful story about the saints, and Brigham's telling them, you guys need to go home and pack. We're leaving today. But the temple was just recently finished, and the saints, they didn't listen. They went into the temple. They knew they needed that power they could be endowed with. And so they ended up staying in the temple and getting as many saints their endowment as possible. And I think it was 265 persons, Brigham Young was saying, that received their endowment that day, which is super cool that they were able to do that. But it shows how important it was to them. And for me personally, it helped me to see how important it is to me and how much I need that in my life. And it was special to get to share that with people there.
That's
I have
awesome.
something I learned today. And Tacey, this is why you need to come be an ordinance worker with me, okay? I'm going to tease you on that until you do it.
I
Um,
know.
we just got a new a temple president. And what's cool about that is when someone's a new temple president, they spend a lot of time going back and forth between Salt Lake and their temple.
Mhm.
And so President Turk, with his wife, has been up and down from Salt Lake back to Gilbert several times just since July. They officially became temple president September 1st, but they've been training since July. There's a gentleman from the missionary department that they've gotten to that they actually knew before, but they've got to know him even more since this new calling. And it's weird because mission department, why would the temple president know them? But he came in to do a training with them, and the point of his training was, one, that we need to ask for more young people before their mission to be ordinance workers, but two, upon returning, Tacey, to continue that service. But here was why. Here's what he had to say about it. So back when, like, Jacob and I went on our missions, when we went to the MTC, yes, we could go to the temple once a week.
Mhm.
We would do one ordinance, or if it was like initiatory, the set or what have you, and then we'd go. And so we were there an hour and a half, 2 hours tops. I mean, if I was there for 2 hours, it would have messed up my schedule, I remember. But um, what they did, and I didn't get the year. President Turk didn't say a year. He said what they realized in the missionary department was that the missionaries needed to have the power of their covenants and understand them to be more effective. So they added 3 more days to the MTC to give them more time in the temples. And now with Provo spaceship, whatever you want to call it, that was next to the MTC,
Mhm.
being gone, they send them to like Mount Timpanogos and some other temples,
Mhm.
in vans or buses or whatever, and they go all over. But they get more temple experience in the MTC, and it's not it's coincidental, but it's not just a coincidence that in the last year, well, 2 years really, but the last year most especially, the growth rate for the church has spiked significantly with new convert baptisms and with retention and activity of those coming back. Um, and so just understanding that the power of our covenants as we receive them and honor and obey them, as the endowment teaches us to do, and allows us to receive them, is really vital to the restoration. And so these saints, these 265, like while Brigham was worried about their temporal safety because mobs are forming and coming, they got one up on the man that was to be prophet in a way. And it's really funny and ironic in a way because he cares and loves about them so much. But maybe he forgot that, as DNC, I think 120 puts it, that maybe they, no, the 118, they forgot the weighty matters for a second.
Mhm.
And they reminded him of the weighty matters. As they were on the plains, I understand as well, Brigham continued to endow additional saints that joined the wagon trains and stuff all the way to Salt Lake until they could all have received them. So it's not even like it where there is a temple, it is necessary, and where there can be a temple, one must be built. And then that makes it the effectual place where the Lord receives his ordinances. Where there is no temple or no ability for one, the Lord doesn't withhold his blessings either. And that's something else that I
Mhm.
think is really key to understand. Just to add for context, but the fact that they knew they needed it is a really kind of fun and powerful testament, I think, um, because their journey. I mean, we're not asked to do anything like that today. In terms of that kind of journey, we're asked to abstain from worldly vices, that didn't exist back then, and maybe that's harder or not. I don't know, but we're in a different kind of battle, and yet the same power and authority that we need, to overcome our trials, is the same power and authority that the Lord has always desired to bless the saints with in any era at any time.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, so going back to the red brick store, we know the endowment was initially sort of set up in the upper room. There was only a handful of people there in that first sort of um, I don't know what you want to call it. That's the first presentation of the endowment.
Mhm.
As I understand it, uh, that took like all day. It was kind of a
Yeah.
long, sort of arduous process of setting up the room so that the partitions and things in the room would be set up where they needed to be, so that throughout the presentation there would be specific instructions relegated
Mhm.
to the different compartments. Um, but there's also a lot of, as I understand it, a lot of discussion and a lot of um, opening of the scriptures and showing from the scriptures principles related to the plan of salvation, and this process took many hours. A lot of people who were there reported taking something like all day or many hours
A
of the
good part
day.
of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I would love to have been a fly on the wall to see
Me
what
too.
that looked like. And I'm wondering, given the choice, uh,
Mhm.
if this was like an 8 hour long session, would you guys do an 8 hour endowment session? I'm 100% yes, I will be there.
If it was how it was back then, I would say sign me up because I know there's got to be so many like cool, just specific things in there. And they decorated the room in the red brick store. There's like he had trees and shrubs. There was a rug in the room that sectioned off part of it. So that would be super cool to see how that would look.
Yeah, I'll add just I have to add this. The covenants have not changed. Nothing
Mm-mm.
about the actual performance of priest or the not performance, that's the wrong word, sorry. The officiating and administration of the ordinance part of the endowment has changed. The presentation has changed numerous times throughout history, right? So what we're talking
Hmm.
about is the presentation part where there used to be a lot more that would go on. Um,
Yes.
and and so I would love that. I think most people would, and there's some of that nostalgia. So, oh, we missed out on it. And so when I say to people, just because I want to act apologetic for a second, our kids in primary, like, okay, so Hadley, Chasey, one of the
Yes.
brightest kids I've ever been around in my life. I was her teacher for like a month before I got into
Hmm.
college after the ward came back together. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm telling you, she's better prepared for the temple than those 265 saints would have been when they told
Oh,
her. I'm serious. She gets it already. And like she was so excited to look forward to, doing baptisms for the dead. Because that was it. I had her, she was 11. And it's like there's a lot that was needed back then that just isn't as needed today. Because if we're paying attention, we're getting all that instruction and more just in primary.
yeah.
Not to mention like going through Sunday school programs, seminary, mission prep, and temple prep, and all this apparatus that's been built to support us. So I just wanted to get apologetic. Yes, I'd love to have an 8-hour session opening the scriptures in the temple setting, going through and saying, here's how you see the covenants in scripture and how God interacted with his people.
Yeah.
But I could do that.
I think it'd be really cool.
Yeah, if they announced, hey, coming to a temple near you, we're gonna go back and do a full 8 hour presentation.
The line would
Uh,
be out the door, and I'd
I
be in it.
I'd be
Yeah,
there. Yeah,
I think I
yeah,
do it once, only once, but
right,
I would still
right.
do it.
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So it's like maybe do it for people for when they are receiving their own endowment, and then after that we have, what we have. I don't know.
um,
Yeah.
Tacey, do you happen to know, and maybe you don't, that's fine, but of the 260 some odd people who went through Nauvoo on their way out as they're trying to get ready to leave under Brigham Young, um, do you know uh, roughly like what the sessions looked like at that point, and maybe if there were some differences between what was presented in the upper room of the red brick store versus how it kind of came to be in the Nauvoo Temple before they left? Do you happen to know maybe some of the differences or what that might have looked like?
I personally didn't really learn anything. It was very, I don't want to say secretive, but it was kept very sacred until the temple was opened up. So I think they knew not to really share it with anybody or didn't really write stuff down about it. Maybe they did somewhere and I just haven't found it. Um, but by the time the temple was actually dedicated for the saints to come through, 42 men and women had the endowment to be able to work as temple ordinance workers. So only that many people knew. So I don't know if there was like differences. I'm sure it changed a lot from the first time, just like, or not in the like changing with the covenants as you were saying, but with the information they were sharing. But I don't know. I got to see if I can find something on that.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's I was just curious, and because I'm thinking about too the common sort of, I don't know, anti-apologetic against the churches, like the endowment keeps changing and all this stuff all the time, and I'm looking at, from, as Michael said, the perspective of the covenants never changed. The presentation has changed over time and become more efficient or
Hmm.
what have you, and we've certainly, I think, um, narrowed it down to its most fundamental components of
Yes.
how best to present the ordinances in a way that is uh, more time sensitive, I guess, so that we can have so many saints come through the temple in any given day. I'm thinking back to Nauvoo and these earliest saints, the first wave of saints receiving their endowment, um, and this sort of all day process for that first group. And then by the time the Nauvoo Temple is getting ready to be dedicated or is dedicated, and you finally have people going through, I am almost positive that Brigham Young had worked to try and sort of maybe edit or um, effectively shorten up certain areas of that presentation, because you have groups of people going through. You can't have a ton of saints going through in a day if it takes all day long. And so, like, to me, this seems like probably the first real um changes to the presentation are probably happening in this period of time in the Nauvoo Temple.
So I
Um,
have something on that. This is from the diary of L. John Nuttall, which is kind of funny. We have a Nuttall family in our ward, Tacey. I wonder if they're related.
Oh,
I grew up
Yeah.
with
they
the Nuttall
probably
family
are.
in my ward
Did
too.
you?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
all right.
cool.
All right. So this is again the diary of L. John Nuttall. He's quoting President Brigham Young. It says, quote, after we got through, Brother Joseph turned to me, President Young, and said, Brother Brigham, this is not arranged right, but we have done the best we could under the circumstances in which we are placed, meaning being in like the top floor of the red brick store. And I wish you to take this matter in hand and organize and systematize all these ceremonies with the signs, tokens, penalties, and key words. I did so, and each time, get this. So how many revisions as he goes through doesn't say, but each time I got something more so that when we went through the temple at Nauvoo, I understood and knew how to place them there. We had our ceremonies pretty correct. So it's not just like a change happened. Brigham's talking about a whole, like, every time he's noting to himself how to improve and then making that improvement. And then so they were fine tuning this whole time.
Hmm. That is so
Yeah.
cool.
Well,
I
and
love that they
and
kept journals.
right?
Yeah.
No kidding. I'm Michael, have you read the new book by Jonathan Stapley? I think it's called Holiness to the Lord.
No, I
It's
have not.
a I'm sure you're aware of the book. It's the book he recently was recently published this year about the development of temple liturgy uh in the church and uh since Kirtland on. And I have not read it. So I'm not gonna be able to speak on the book per se. There won't be any spoilers here for it. Um, but it is interesting to me because there are other places that do document some of the changes to temple liturgy, to changes in wording, changes in aspects of the presentation over time in church history. Um, it is interesting to note just how often it seemed to change, and it seems like the changes. I know a lot of people talk about like some of the changes that have happened in recent years to whether it's the video and media material used in the presentation of the endowment, or whether it's like going back to the removal of certain aspects of the endowment related to penalties and other things. And people like to say like, oh, there's been all these changes in recent years, but it seems to me, looking at just kind of a general timeline of changes and events in the development of temple worship, temple work in the church, it seems like there are quite a lot of changes happening in those earlier years. Um,
Mhm.
and so it seems to be like the changes have been slower and less as time has gone on in total. I think um,
I think
just
that's right.
just my ignorant observation.
I don't
No, I
think
think
it's
that's
ignorant.
yeah. I think
I
that's right.
think that was like during that time, that was literally brand new.
Yeah.
Like families being able to be sealed, brand new. There was a lot of mistakes that went with that.
Mhm.
Endowments, brand new. I'm sure there was a lot of mistakes that went with that. When they found out they could do baptisms for the dead, that was a mess too. But the Lord was able to like help lead and guide them and to perfect it. And so I think it's totally normal. There was a ton of changes during that time. And I think even now the Lord makes it almost more, I guess, perfected, more efficient, I guess you would say, because now well, an endowment session is probably an hour and 15 minutes or so. Um, I personally am grateful for it. I know it's kind of hard because it seems like a lot of change and stuff, but it makes it to where I can, I think any, or I guess all of us can do even more sessions and be able to provide those blessings to people that didn't have a chance to in this life. That was my thoughts.
I love it. Love it.
Um, Tacey, when did you go through the temple for your own endowment?
November of 23.
Okay. And
Yes.
Michael, you're uh a little further back.
Yeah. At 20 years before that.
Okay. So luckily for me, I'm not I'm kind of in between. Um so I was 2010. Um and I remember even just in those first few months uh after I had gone through the temple my first time, going through several more times, trying to familiarize myself a little bit more and become more comfortable. I had a wonderful first experience. Michael and I have talked about this. We did a live stream about this some months ago about temple prep, preparing for the temple, and my first experience going through the temple was phenomenal. I loved it, but I didn't feel like I really understood everything that was going on. And so I spent some time before my mission going through several more times. And I noted even in the half a dozen times I had been in the month leading up to my own missionary service, a few changes or a few differences that I found. Um, and so to me, the idea that, and this is me kind of getting back on my anti-apologetic soapbox, the idea that like the Lord has to reveal it one way and it's perfect just this way, and it'll never change, nothing will ever change, it's like this completed thing, to me never made sense. And I think that the idea that this is an ongoing restoration, that there is still many things that the Lord will yet reveal, um, tells me that more change is coming. And what that looks like, well, time will tell. But um, it's to me, I count it as something of a blessing, I guess, to be able to witness some of these changes along the way, because it provides opportunity, I think, for me to refocus and say, oh, there's a change that happened here or there. What is the purpose of that change? What can I learn from that? And what should I be focusing on because of this change? So rather than like being upset that, oh, they removed this part or they altered the phrasing of that part or whatever, um, I get to kind of just soak it in and say, oh, this is interesting. They've changed this little bit here and there. What can I learn from this? What is the church? What are the leaders, and what does the Lord ultimately want me to take from this new, updated version, or what have you? And Michael, having served in the temple for some time now, I know even in the short time that you've served, uh, I'm sure there are certain aspects or things that have changed, even just if the presentation haven't changed. Maybe some of the ways that you're being trained and talking about how to uh, help others through the temple has maybe been updated, and you've received inspiration and revelation into how best to move forward in your respective calling. I don't know if maybe you can speak to that, but um, Yeah,
I
I
mean,
think
a little
there's
bit if you
something there.
want. Like, so right now I'm a veil coordinator, so I actually train the other workers on exactly that. And the people that we have the most training to do with, ironically, are the people that have been there the longest. Even though I qualify as being one of them, because Gilbert's been open for 11 years and I've been there for over 8 of it. But
Jeez.
it's funny because they fall back into other older habits and things, and there's just issues like so one of the fun things about the endowment shortening, and I'm gonna twist this back around to you, Tacey, in a minute with some questions, but if you allow me here, is that we get to slow down in the ceremony and take a lot more time and be more mindful with and of the patron that's there to perform these ordinances either for himself or our kindred dead. And having to remind people that we have that opportunity, we have that time. We don't need to be in any kind of rush. There's no time crunch. Just do everything we can with the focus. So our job is to assist the patron in every way to focus on Christ. We do that best when we focus on Christ, but our focus is seeing Christ in the patron and helping that patron see that in themselves, right? And so we have this very strict desire to help them have the best experience in witnessing the Spirit, understanding the covenants, and realizing that plan of redemption, happiness, and salvation that Tacey mentioned is applicable to them and those for whom they're representing. And so, then the other group, of course, are the people that are new. Like, you got to train them up. But it's beautiful to see because, like, right now on my shift, I'm an oddity because I've been there the longest. And only I found out today, we did a count. We were bored at one point. We did a count. There's 98 workers on my shift, and only 16 have been there longer than 2 years total between brothers and sisters. So 15 others. And so I was, and when I heard that, we went and I was monitoring. One of us stands behind the veil. And if you've been in the Gilbert Temple, you usually see we're opening the door so you can go to the celestial room. That's not why we're there, though. We're monitoring the activity at the veil. And I noticed, like, yeah, there's a couple of older guys, but it was mostly young men in their 20s that were receiving at the veil. And if you understand the symbolism of that, just the power that gives some young man in his life, going to the other side, realizing that the brothers on that side and the sisters on that side who are presenting at the veil, that they were all younger generally as well. It's really cool to see this shift happening, and the continuation of it. But like that, these younger saints are really exact. If I train them incorrectly, that's on me, and I need to correct them for my mistake. But they're doing everything as they're being asked to do it so precisely. It's really amazing, that kind of faith and that kind of obedience. And sounds robotic. It's certainly not robotic, because the point is you focus primarily on the patron. And so what you have to do is know how it is that I serve them the best, given any kind of situation or things that happen. And so there's a lot of thinking, and there's a lot of like role playing we do and training and things like that. So yeah, I mean, and so I've been through 3 evolutions of the endowment, from what it used to be when I learned how to officiate in an endowment session to what it is now, where the officiator doesn't do very much. If anyone's noticed, the officiator is sitting in the chair, basically until the prayer circle. We didn't used to do that, right? And so now to have that be the case, because again, the focus is to put the patron's mind on Christ, and that's why the presentation is given the way it is. and really trying to hone down whether we expand it by for time or anything again. I can guarantee you the expansion will be because there's a need to focus on some aspect of Jesus Christ or being Christ-like, becoming Christ-like. Um, so as far as that, yeah, I could talk to that for too long, and I probably just did. And so I want to bring it back though. I want because one of the things I found out, I'm going to totally like curveball this, Jacob, and I'm sorry, but
Go
one
for
of
it.
the things I found out is yes, the Relief Society officially organized in the Red Brick Store, but Tacey, where did the Relief Society really start and how?
Oh, yes. Just right from the beginning.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, of course, it was organized in the Red Brick Store, like we were kind of talking about. But something we suggest to people when they come is to go over to Sarah Granger Kimball's home. A lot of people haven't really heard that name. She's not related to Heber C. Kimball in any way. Neither is her husband, Hiram, if I'm remembering his name correctly. But their story's pretty cool too. Sarah was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Hiram was not. But I love that getting to share that dynamic because it shows the respect they have for each other's faith. And even Hiram, her husband, was really good friends with Joseph Smith, and he helped in different aspects of the church and even donated a piece of land that was worth about $500, which was a ton back then. So it showed how much they really loved and respected each other. And I like getting to share that aspect with people because it shows the support that comes in later when Sarah and her seamstress are talking together. They're wanting to help with the building of the temple. From Sarah's home, if you're sitting in the living room, I believe, right outside the window, you can see a beautiful view of the Nauvoo Temple. And so that means that she saw it as it was being built, and so did her seamstress. And they just wanted to help in any way that they could. And they noticed that the men's shirts were getting super torn up and just dirty and everything. And Margaret said, well, I can sew, but I don't have the means for that. I don't have the means to pay for fabric and stuff. But Sarah, she did. And so they were like, I bet you other women want to help as well. And so I'm not sure if they sent out a message like by paper or letter or whatever, but they sent out a message. And if I remember the correct number as well, it was 12 women that gathered in that home that wrote up a constitution and bylaws for the sewing society that they're going to create to be able to help with the building of the temple so they could prepare the temple and help in that way. And they showed their constitution and bylaws to the prophet. And I love what Joseph Smith says. He said that it was the best he had ever seen, but this is not what these sisters wanted, and that the Lord had something greater in store for them. And he promised the women, I will organize them under the priesthood after the pattern of the priesthood, which must have been so exciting for them to hear. And so that led to him telling them to meet him at his red brick store that following Thursday, which was March 17th, 1842. And on that day, the Relief Society was organized. They decided on Emma Smith for their president of their society, and 20 women were gathered in that space. But they decided on Emma, and she picked two counselors for her, which, if you want, I have them here. It was Sarah Cleveland and Anne Whitney. Um, and then they were trying to decide on a name for their society. This is like one of my favorite parts because it's kind of funny. But they're going between the Nauvoo Benevolent Society and the Nauvoo Female Relief Society. They're kind of going back and forth. Benevolent was really popular during that time for societies, but some of them argued that those societies were often corrupt and not what they said they actually stood for. But some people said that relief sounded like they were going to relieve a prisoner of his sentence or that they were going to do something extraordinary. And I love at this point, Emma Smith, I don't know if she gets up or if she just says it, but she says, we are going to do something extraordinary. We expect extraordinary occasions and pressing calls. And I love the confidence that she stands up and says with that, and that she knew how important this society was going to be. And it helped me to appreciate the Relief Society more because when I turned 18, I was like, God, I got to go into Relief Society now. But understanding that it started off as something to help prepare this temple, and it turned into them preparing people for the temple. And their job was to bring in all these saints coming from different areas, taking care of them, seeing if they need food. Do they need help with their home being built? Are they widowed, taking care of kids by themselves? Let's get on it. Let's take care of them, and give them the things that they need. And let's start helping collect for the penny drive so we can get nails and different things like that to help with the building of the temple. And it just started off in a home on the other side of town in Nauvoo that wanted to make a sewing society. And I love that it just started with an idea, and getting to
Mhm.
share that with people that came in, especially the younger girls. Sometimes you could tell it just really impacted them. It was so awesome to be able to share those stories with them.
That is awesome. I love it. I love when you talk about that. That's why I asked for it a second time.
Yeah,
One of my
it's
favorite
like my
things.
favorite.
Yeah. Oh, it's become my favorite too. No doubt. So, um, where was? Am I incorrectly remembering? Where is the West Grove?
The West Grove is just down from the temple. Um, I don't know how to explain it other than it's
It's
between
near
Young
that home
Street
though.
and another one. Yeah, it's
Okay.
right next to Edward Hunter's home.
Edward
Right,
Hunter's home.
like right side, or if you're looking at his house, it's on that side.
Okay.
Totally know
I
where that is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, in my
yeah.
head, for some reason, I thought it was the Kimball's home because I think I remember you saying it was like in view of the temple. And
Mhm.
so, anyway, and I was going to connect it because what is it that happened in the West Grove, Tacey?
So a lot of different things there, but one of the stories or the only story we tell people about is in that West Grove, the Relief Society continued to grow. And so they started meeting in groves as well. And Joseph Smith met with them first to tell them about the revelation he had just dictated, or not dictated, but he had received. And it was baptisms for the dead, and that they were able to do that for their ancestors that passed on. A lot of these mothers had kids that had passed away that were past the age of 8 years old or older than that. And I'm sure family members, their husbands, and things like that. And it's just so special to me that he wanted to share that with the Relief Society first and promise them that he would write down that revelation. Um, but that's the only story we share there. But there's tons of different meetings that happen there. But it's special that that's where that super important doctrine was revealed that still blesses people all over the world today.
There seems to be a, I don't know if this is enough to be considered a pattern, but quite a few presidents of the church like to reveal things to the sisters in the Relief Society before they reveal them to the church at large.
Now, what
Um,
specifically do you have in mind, Jacob? I think I know, but Tacey wasn't alive at this time, and we were not very old. But what are you talking about?
oh, it's this little thing called the Proclamation on the Family.
Yeah,
Um,
which is like it's almost understanding the connection that has to the doctrine of baptism for the dead, and doing this work for the dead, that we can redeem the dead through the keys of the priesthood and the power that Christ has to do so, that the gates of Hades or hell, whichever word you use, will not keep them away from Christ. They do not win, right?
which, by the
Hmm.
way, is the proper exegesis of that passage in Matthew
Correct.
16.
That's right. Forget Mark Driscoll and all those other losers. Just
Uh,
kidding. Oh, he's been talked of too much lately. Sorry.
oh yeah, I we could do to have a little time away from them. Yeah, but no, I find it interesting that and this certainly isn't the only thing that came to mind, and I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but Joseph had revealed several things to the sisters in those last few years in Nauvoo prior to being shared with even Council of 50 and other groups and members within the church more broadly. And so to me, this speaks to a larger sentiment and connection that Joseph had to the sisters of the church, that he felt that they were uniquely called for some grand purposes in the church, and obviously still are today, but felt that certain things could be revealed to the sisters um, before being rolled out to the church, because he knew the sisters could be trusted with certain information, and that he could share things with them, and that he knew they would be able to receive it and appropriately utilize that information. And the Relief Society has stood for oh geez, what is it now? So they were officially organized, Tacey, in what year?
1842.
42.
Mhm.
So we're coming up on 100. What is that?
It'll be
180,
184 next
84
year.
years.
Yeah.
So and this is, as I understand it, it's still it is the longest running female led organization in the world. Is that correct?
I think so. I think so.
Um, you guys have a lot to be proud of, and a lot to be um you guys have a lot of responsibility, and the sisters have always borne the responsibility of a lot of things in the church, even from the earliest days. And I think it's because Joseph, going all the way back to those early years, knew just how integral the sisters are in the plan of salvation. And this isn't a, like, you know, guys rule, girls drool, kind of a thing, but we need each other. One of the reasons I think that President Hinckley probably had in mind to share the family proclamation with the sisters first, um, is kind of a to let the sisters know, to let the Relief Society know just how integral they are to the progress of the Lord's church, and to the propulsion of the gospel throughout the world. Um, and this is just one of those really cool things. I'm glad you shared that story of the Relief Society, Casey, because that to me is just more evidence heaped on the evidence pile of how awesome the sisters have been in the church, and not to take it for granted, I think.
I share one more quote Joseph Smith said after that.
Yeah, of
Yes.
course.
Yes.
It's also one of my favorites. Just going with everything we've said from from Joseph Smith, he said that the church was never perfectly organized until the women were thus organized. And it was just, I love getting to share that. I'm like, that just melts my heart. They knew we needed the women to be organized as well. Um, and it's cool because after they were organized, it was only like several weeks later that the full endowment was able to be given.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's right. Yeah. So you mentioned that the revelation on baptisms for the dead was first kind of given in this. I don't know if it was a meeting, official meeting or anything, but it was first given to the sisters here in Nauvoo, just off from the grounds of the temple.
Mhm.
You did mention there are some other cool little tidbits and things that happened there as well. Is there anything that maybe you could share with us that maybe you guys don't really talk about in the tours, and things like that, that were meaningful, at least to you?
Mm, we didn't talk about in the tours. I feel like we talked about everything. Nothing was off limits. Um, I'd say probably the only cool fact I could probably share with you that we sometimes tell people, it's literally just about the house, so it's nothing crazy or anything. But the mansion house, when that's the home that Joseph and Emma moved into between 1842 to 1843, Joseph built in their room a false wall in the closet that led up to the attic for a hiding space. That's the only thing we don't really share openly,
I think
but
that's cool though.
yeah,
Yeah.
everything we learn, we share. Like nothing is off limits. Um, whether it's about masonry, maybe it's about plural marriage, it's the whatever the heavier stuff is, everything is out. We don't hide anything.
So can I ask you, you mentioned it when we talked to Sam as well, but on the plural marriage thing, again, like I think it's a correct assumption to understand and believe that it's harder for women to accept.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't know where you were on the issue before your mission. I know where you're on the issue now.
Yeah.
So, can you describe the process of how you gained a testimony of this doctrine as it was lived in the time for which it was commanded, and what it means to you, and pull in whatever sources and things you can?
Yeah, of course. Um, that's another reason I loved Joseph Smith's house. That was something we were very upfront about. In the kitchen area of the or the homestead, we tell people about plural marriage specifically, like nothing is hidden. Um, but I guess I personally haven't struggled with it too much. Like it doesn't bug me that much. It probably should, but it doesn't. But I do know it's a very hard subject for a lot of men and women in our church, and that's why I love getting to share it with people in Joseph Smith's home. Kind of to give the background of the story that kind of helps lead into it. Um, in their home, Joseph and Emma's, they would have sermons there as well. It was one of the biggest spaces at the time the saints first got there, and one of these sermons, Hiram, Joseph Smith's brother, was teaching. And there was a lot of rumors going around at that time of plural marriage and of eternal families. And I believe it was um, eternal families hadn't fully come out at that time yet. And it was a lot to grasp for people. And so he was kind of just trying to dispel any rumors that were going around at that time. And so he had the Bible, he had the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and he was telling people these three books are the living oracles of God. Anything else is of man and is not of God. And so, in a sense, he didn't mean to. Hiram is a very humble and kind person, but he kind of, in a way, made it sound like they didn't need a living prophet. And maybe that's not what he meant. I guarantee you it wasn't because his brother was a prophet and he was one of his biggest supports. But after he finished, I kind of love this story because it shows Joseph being a friend again. He actually invited Brigham Young to this meeting, and you can read in Saints, he went to Brigham Young's home, I believe, and it was like, you need to come with me to my house because my brother is saying something and I can't say anything. And Brigham didn't really want to. And Joseph said, if you don't come with me, I'm not going home tonight. So Brigham Young ended up coming with him. And after Hiram sat down, Joseph literally said, get up. And so Brigham Young, he gets up, he takes those three books and he lays them out, and he's a little dramatic. I love this guy. But he says, I would not give the ashes of a rye straw for these three books without the living oracles of God. So dramatic, but I love it. Um, but he went on to testify after that how important it was that they had a living Latter-day prophet to lead and guide their church with revelation from God and to help guide them through change and through things that were happening during that time. And after Brigham sits down, Hiram immediately stands up and he acknowledges that Brigham was right. And I love that shows his humble character. And after we tell people about that, we do get to tell them like some of those rumors that were going around at that time was eternal families. That was a lot for people to understand. This was something that was just revealed to Joseph line upon line over the years. So this, I'm sure, was easy for him to understand, but once Hiram understood that revelation, because Joseph was talking to him about it, he urged him to write that down, and that revelation's in Doctrine and Covenants 132. But what came with that at that time, and we also tell people, was the practice of plural marriage. And something we tell them is that in the Old Testament, it restored the practice, such as patriarchs of Abraham, Moses, and Jacob, and relate it to the Bible and everything, and bring it to God commanded at that time that some of those saints participate in plural marriage. And I love how, I don't know if this is how God had commanded him or if this is just how Joseph went about it. I'm sure it's a little bit of both, but this was really hard for Joseph, but he needed to obey God's command. And so he would teach people the principles of plural marriage that he felt prompted to talk to. And he would urge them to receive revelation for themselves if that was something they needed to do as well. And I love that kind of almost trust that is given to those persons to go and learn for themselves, to receive that revelation for themselves if that was something the Lord needed them to do, which still wouldn't be easy, even if the Lord said yes. But they just followed so faithfully and just had, I don't know, kind of did that. And we don't have direct accounts on how Joseph and Emma felt about it, but just from everybody's kind of how it was for them. And from the outside looking in, we know it was something that was really hard. And I cannot imagine ever having to deal with something like that. But I love that they stayed focused on their faith in Jesus Christ. That was their center. Always, no matter what was going on in the world around them, no matter if Joseph was in Liberty Jail or being chased out of Nauvoo, or if they were having to practice plural marriage during this time, their focus was on their Savior. And that's how they were able to keep everything together and know that that's what God had them, needed them to do at that time. And some of those marriages was just for time, some were for time and eternity. Um, but the understanding that I learned about it was that at that time provided for people that were widowed, women that were widowed, to be able to have those blessings of an eternal family that comes after this world. And it also made it to where they were taken care of if they were widows, if it was for time or for this time and everything like that. And I understand that's not how all of them were, but teaching in his home that specific thing that happened, plural marriage, there was an undeniable spirit in there every single time I taught about it. And that's how I was able to gain my testimony that I don't think I could do it, but I know that this was something the saints had to do. And this is something that God asked them to do. And I was able to gain that testimony as I served there more and more. And I love that people, they just like, they were so open and learning or open and they listened. Sometimes they'd have questions, sometimes they wouldn't, but you could feel the spirit testifying in that room of something that seems so horrible today, which it probably would be, but the spirit testifies of it. And I don't think it could testify in that way than it could in that home. Um, but then we get to teach them that later, Wilford Woodruff, when he was the prophet of the church, he received revelation from God that that was no longer needed and it had served its purpose, and that the manifesto was issued in 1890, which ended plural marriage completely. Um, and I don't know why, but I remember this one specific time. Only one time did I have this happen where I was teaching about that. And there's just it was a ton of people. You could fit like 30 people in that house. It's kind of a big space. But I remember that the spirit was saying that you need to tell this group that God loves women. Like I was like, I don't know how to fit that in like smoothly. And so I just went for it. I was like, I do, like this is a hard subject, but God loves his women and they're extremely important to his plan. And I know it's still a touchy subject for a lot of people, but I know how important men and women are to Heavenly Father's plan. Even if we have a little bit of rough history and learning about that stuff is kind of hard, but I know how important women are to Heavenly Father's plan. Even learning in that space was something like that. The Spirit still testified how important each of us are to Heavenly Father.
Yeah.
That was kind of a rant, but
Oh, I
I
love
just
that.
love
Oh my
that
gosh.
place.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We
Yes.
do have a related question in the chat. This is from our friend Sam Henninger, who goes by LDS Confidence in Christ. He says, Christopher Blythe, and you may or may not know who that is, but he has a popular channel as well. He does a lot of church history work and stuff. Christopher Blythe recently interviewed a historical expert on James Strang, and he shared how progressive Strang was concerning the thoughts and desires of plural wives. What was your experience learning about how Joseph viewed plural marriage and specifically his ideas of plural marriage and his thoughts on plural wives? because obviously, and I'm adding this to his question for some context for myself. Um,
Hmm.
but obviously, in those early days when uh, Joseph and some of the saints are beginning to practice plural marriage and be sealed, um, there's a lot of confusion going on. There's a lot of sort of, I guess you could say, mudslinging going on between different groups and how this is being viewed. And obviously, for various reasons, Joseph and the church are trying to protect this doctrine and protect how it's being perceived. And there are those even in the church in those early years who are maybe perverting the way that had been revealed to Joseph that this practice ought to be implemented. Um, and I know James Strang is a little bit beyond that. He's beyond Nauvoo and that in church history. Obviously, we have the Strangites now and that. But with some of the different, I guess, ways that people were talking about and thinking about, and even entering into plural marriages in those early years in Nauvoo and even beyond Nauvoo. Um, from your experience and what you've learned about this practice, how did Joseph handle the practice of plural marriage, and what were some of his thoughts on it, and maybe even from the perspective of the sisters who entered into marriages and sealings with the prophet? What was some of their experiences, and how did they think about the practice of plural marriage during those days?
Yeah. Um, Again, there's not too much from Joseph, but from what I from one story specifically, I'm not sure which sisters, I think it was sisters. He took two people to wife through plural marriages, two sisters, but did not tell Emma during this time. Emma, she was kind of back and forth with supporting of this idea, which I can understand why. But during that time, she was not supportive of it. And so Joseph, still having to follow God's command, did it in secret. Um, and so later on, when Emma was more supportive of it, she said, okay, you can take these people to plural marriage or to wife. And it was the people he had already taken to wife. And so, um, from what I can tell, it seemed like he just didn't want to do it and definitely did not want to upset his wife. I'm sure that's the last thing he wanted to do. And so he kind of redid another fake ceremony. So I guess from kind of those situations that I learned about, I would say he struggled with it a lot as well. Um, and I need to read more on the wives as well that have left journal entries. I know one of them was Heber C. Kimball's daughter, I believe. I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, Helen Mar.
Um,
Helen Mark Kimball.
yes, yes, that's what it was. He took her to wife, but during that time, it was kind of so people's families could be sealed together. So they encouraged their daughter Heber and Valate. Heber and Valate were encouraging her to be sealed or to
Yeah.
be his wife so that their families could be together. And so I think for some of these women, it helped them out a lot. And I think it really just depended on who it was. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different directions we could take the question, and um, if I'm understanding Sam's question correctly, I think he's getting at maybe the different views that were around about what plural marriage was for,
Hmm.
and how these marriages or sealings were viewed by those who entered into them, compared to those like James Strang um, or some others who are kind of going off in their own direction with it. Um,
Hmm.
Obviously, we read about a handful of cases and those members of the church who are sort of perverting what the practice was for their own purposes, um, and all that. But yeah, it seems to me that Sam's question was more just about like, how did Joseph and those closest to him and who are practicing plural marriage and plural sealings, like what was their attitude towards it? What was their ideas towards it? And yeah, I think you um I think you hit the nail on the head with
Well,
that
Tacey
too.
has a story she could tell us
I
about Heber
do.
the pilot. Is that the one you were thinking of?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I just remembered another one. There was very drastic differences with the Latter-day Saints. So like Hiram and I can't remember the other person, but Hiram Smith and somebody else. I just read it recently in Saints. It was one of the other apostles, I believe. Started with a W, his last name did. But um when they found out kind of the idea of plural marriage was going around, one of them was like, I would punch somebody in the face if they try to get me to do that. I was like, oh, that's a little bit crazy. But then you have the other end of the spectrum where people understood the importance of this. And the one I'd like to share with you was actually written by Helen Whitney, who Heber and Valate's daughter. But this was when Heber was commanded to take a plural wife from God. And so Joseph had to tell him, hey, God needs you to do this, but you can't tell your wife. I cannot imagine being in that situation. But eventually, Heber agreed after the third time of being told, you cannot tell anybody, which was pretty um, big for him because Heber, he never went against what Joseph asked him to. Joseph had said that him and Brigham Young were the only two that never raised their heel against him and the things that he had asked. But Helen writes about what she saw from her perspective of this going on. But she writes, my mother had noticed a change in his, meaning Heber's looks and appearance, and when she inquired the cause, he tried to evade her question. But it so worked upon his mind that his anxious and haggard looks betrayed him daily and hourly. And finally, his misery became so unbearable that it was impossible to control his feelings. Instead of going to bed, he would walk the floor, beseeching the Lord with his whole soul to be merciful and reveal to his wife the cause of his great sorrow, for he himself could not break his vow of secrecy. His anguish and my mother's were indescribable. And when unable to endure it longer, she retired to her room, where with a broken and contrite heart she poured out her grief. While pleading as one would for life, the vision of her mind was opened, and before her she saw the principle of celestial marriage, illustrated in all its beauty and glory, together with the great exaltation and honor it would confer upon her in that immortal and celestial sphere, if she would but accept it and stand in her place by her husband's side. She was also shown the woman he had taken to wife. Her soul was satisfied and filled with the Spirit of God. With a countenance beaming with joy, she returned to my father, saying, Heber, what you have kept from me, the Lord has shown me. She related the scene to me and to many others, and told me she never saw so happy a man as father was when she described the vision. She covenanted to stand by him and honor the principle, which covenant she faithfully kept. And though her trials were often heavy and grievous to bear, her integrity was unflinching to the end. And so, totally different perspective on plural marriage. Um, I think it goes with, I personally can't say that I would be able to accept this if this ever came to be, but I think it does come with, did they inquire those things of the Lord? If they were willing to ask the Lord, like, is this really something that's going on right now? Do you really need us to do this? And just, I think that would depend on how their attitude was towards plural marriage. So total night and day difference between the saints and what they thought of it.
Yeah. So I do have a time cap myself, and I promised you a time cap, Tacey. We're hitting at it. So I'm going to steer the conversation now because I loved how your testimony was regarding Carthage and what you said. I'd love to end this live stream along those same lines, if you could, and then I don't know if we're going to have any last second anything after that, but tell us, like, how does Tacey Chalk teach people about Carthage Jail?
Yeah. Carthage. Oh, there's so much. I just love that place. But with Carthage Jail, it's kind of more, I don't want to say scripted, but there's a lot more quotes to memorize. But those quotes are very powerful. Um, but it's so special. It's original. The jail itself is original. And getting to bring people through and help them to realize, especially the youth that came through, that they were walking in the same place that the prophet was, and that these people are real. Like I think we were describing last time on the podcast, the floors are real. A lot of the doors are real. The door of the jailer's bedroom that was shot through, that's real. The door casings, like it's amazing that this place has stood for that period of time, or for how long that it has, and still have so many original things inside of it. And to me, that's a testimony how important these sites are to the Lord. Um, but I guess you can go up to more of when they're first coming here, there's mobs already growing around outside the jail. And you'd think that the jailer that's living there with his family at the time, he had his wife and 7 kids, would be rude to them. But he actually got to know these men really well. Even though they were in one of the more dangerous cells, they're in the criminal cell, which has literally 3 slits in the walls of 2 feet limestone, and that's all they had for air because of their charges, which at that time was inciting a riot and treason. But he still, something must have drawn the jailer to these men to talk to them. And he got to know them after a few hours. He moved them downstairs to a cell, which was more comfortable. And I guess I like to point out too that Joseph and Hiram weren't there alone on this charge. They had 8 of their friends that came with them. And I love that that shows their testimony they had of Jesus Christ and of the prophet as well, and that they were just standing there as their testimonies as well. But I think I shared this one last time too, but one of my favorite quotes we get to share, even though these men are in a jail, there's mobs surrounding all around, and Joseph and Hiram know they're close to their death. They are able to have a wonderful conversation in a jail cell locked up together. And one of their friends, Dan Jones, wrote about this. He said, "We were all locked up together in a dungeon, which was about 10 feet square. And here we spent the first evening of our imprisonment in sweet conversation about the mystery of godliness. Oh, such joy possessed them when they foretold that they both were about to finish their race and go to their reward. I never saw them more cheerful and intent on heaven, nor did I ever before think that Carthage Jail was the gate of paradise." I love those strong words of kind of comparing this jail to a gate of paradise, and that they're able to take something that was so horrible and happening to them, and they made it like their little piece of heaven, even though they knew their time was coming to an end. And that's how you know they had that true testimony in Jesus Christ, and that that was his gospel, and that is his gospel. Um, but they did end up in the jailer's bedroom because the jailer, again's gotten to know these men. They're very kind, and he wanted them to be more comfortable. And so they were moved in there on June 26th of 1844. And even in that super stressful space, again with the mobs and everything, um, Joseph is just working on his legal defense. His brother Hiram starts reading from the Book of Mormon, taking this time to again testify of their savior and bring that peace into the room for themselves and for the guards as well. After they read from the Book of Mormon, Joseph, he bore powerful witness of the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, and he did it loud enough so that the guards could hear as well, which I love that about him, that he took any opportunity to testify of his savior. um, and so, following that day, the 27th of June, Joseph sent 6 of the men on different errands that needed to be ran. So that just left 4 inside of the jailer's bedroom. Those men weren't allowed to come back in from the guards outside. They weren't there on a charge, and so they weren't allowed to come back in. And so that just left Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith, John Taylor, and Willard Richards. Um, and a little bit closer to dinner time, around 5 p.m., the jailer, he came in and he asked the men if they wanted to move back to the criminal cell. The jailer had to run a message. And so he was going to be gone, wanting them to be safe in case something did happen because that mob's still growing. And Joseph agreed that they would go after supper. And sorry to backtrack, but I'm gonna. Prior to this, on that same day, there was a lot of tension, as you can imagine. And so John Taylor, he actually sings "A Poor Wayfaring Man of Grief" for the men, all 7 verses of it. Um, and that's one of my favorite songs. We got to listen to it when I started serving at Carthage. It just kept replaying in my head because we play it for every single tour. But I love that it's kind of exact to their situations. This man that's kind of in this situation in jail, but not willing to kind of give up his testimony. And because of this, the Savior is able to reveal himself to him, be like, "You were helping me all this time." And I just can't imagine how that must have felt. And being able to tell that or play that and kind of tell the story, and it kind of, I feel like it just all goes together. It was awesome. But after the jailer left, around 5:16 ish, we know that's when the attack happened. The mob stormed into the jail and started pushing on that door. But these 4 men, they pushed themselves against the door, trying to make it to where the mob couldn't break in. And so at this time, a member of the mob shoots through the door, and that one hits Hiram Smith in the face. And so he turns away and he's hit once again in his lower back. He falls to the ground. He dies pretty quickly. And Joseph cries, "Brother Hiram," which is, sometimes that would make me like cry in there because Hiram was one of his biggest supports ever. And I love that idea because Hiram was the older brother, so he didn't need to be supporting his little brother or anything. But again, he knew that it was the restored gospel of Jesus Christ here on the earth and that his brother was a prophet of God. And so he was able to support him. I can only imagine how heartbreaking that must have been in that moment. But at this time, the mob's starting to push open the door enough they can shove gun barrels and stuff through. And so the men on the other side are using canes to try and knock those away. Um, and at some point, John Taylor runs for the window. The windows are open at this point. Um, but John Taylor gets hit in the leg. And there's been a lot of kind of conception about the pocket watch coming up to the time that I served in Nauvoo. Um, I believe John Taylor thinks he got shot with a pocket watch. The church says that most likely, or possibly, he hit against the windowsill. I think a miracle could have happened during that time. So whatever helps with that story for you guys. Um, but he falls to the ground. He's hit 3 more times as he's going for cover underneath the bed. So now 2 people are seriously injured. Hiram's dead at this time of those 2 people. And so just Joseph and Willard are at the door trying to keep it shut. And at this time, I'm not sure what goes through Joseph Smith's mind. My personal thoughts is that he needs to protect his last friend he has alive. And so he darts for the window as well. And as he straddles the windowsill, I love getting to point that out to people, but that's the same windowsill that was there when he was there. He's shot twice in the back and once from outside that hit just below his heart. And his last words that he says as he falls out the window was, "Oh Lord, my God." And to me, that's still pretty significant that he's still, maybe that was a cry for help or anything, but still his sight is on God and on his Savior. And that till the end, he stayed strong in his testimony of his restored gospel. Um, and after this, we get to share a testimony that was shared by Willard Richards and John Taylor. They both survived the attack. Willard Richards just had a little nick on his left ear from a bullet. But they bear their testimony. I believe it's in Doctrine and Covenants 135. But a little part of verse 3 says, "Joseph Smith, the prophet and seer of the Lord, has done more, save Jesus only for the salvation of men in this world, than any other man that lived in it. He lived great and he died great in the eyes of God and his people, and has sealed his mission and his works with his own blood. And so has his brother Hiram. In life they were not divided, and in death they were not separated." And although it's such a somber story to tell people, it's so powerful to be able to teach all the members that are coming in, non-members, and especially the youth, that they were not willing to deny what they knew was true, even if it meant death for them. Um, but I just love getting to be able to testify of Jesus Christ in that way through Joseph, Hiram, and all these other men's testimonies that they knew their Savior would still, like, I don't even know, just save them. No matter what happened to them, they were saved. And that this was Jesus Christ's true gospel here on the earth, and they weren't willing to deny that. And it's just such a powerful testimony to be able to tell people about and hopefully help them to receive that own testimony for them. Love that
Yeah.
voice.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I gotta get running. I know Tacey needs to as well. I have one last question, Tacey.
Yes.
Best song by Deftones.
Best song?
Yeah.
There's a few. I really like the song My Own Summer, Shove It.
All right.
That's a good one.
Joseph Smith approves. Um,
Yes.
uh, well, I appreciate you guys coming on. Tacey, thank you so much for spending the afternoon with us, talking about your mission, talking about church history sites. There's so many more things that I know we could talk about. But I'm grateful you were able to give me the time that you did, and Michael as well. It's always good to have you on and hear from you too. For anybody at home who would love to learn a little bit more about church history and a little bit more about the things that we've talked about tonight, is there any resource or anything that you, Tacey, would point them to help them learn more about some of these church history sites and more about church history in general? What would you point them towards?
Okay. If you have the Gospel Library app, the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints app, um, there is a little subsection. I guess you can see, like, there's scriptures and everything. There is a church history section. Tons of information's in there about Nauvoo, about everything and anything under that umbrella. And then another really good resource is the Saints books and the Joseph Smith Papers website. And that has a ton of journals from the saints during that time and all throughout. Like, you can, I think I said this last time, you find the King Follett sermon on there, all sorts of stuff. So those are the best resources that I would say.
Awesome. Thank you, Tacey. I appreciate that. Um, and yeah, any last thoughts, Michael?
Get out to these sites if you get the opportunity. I know it costs money to travel and all this stuff. I will say, my wife and I started planning a trip, and things like Airbnbs and hotels, they're not that expensive in this area. I'm surprised. It's not like I understand that things are different for everybody, but this is not an expensive trip if you can make it. All the sites to go into, the roughly 30 or so, they're free, right? You could spend a few days, gain this great like bonding time, this testimony, or be like Jacob and try to listen to death metal while your family has
Yeah.
that. And um, just do the things that are going to help you come closer to Christ and still have joy and fun as a family. This is one of those things, for sure. So I just appreciate Tacey and everything that she's brought back with her, to enlighten my way as well.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. And all those listening at home, let me know in the comments if you have been to some of these sites. We'd love to hear what your favorite site was, what your favorite experience was going to some of the church history sites and learning about the amazing stories that took place there. And with that, we'll see you guys in the next live stream or the next video. And I appreciate you guys joining me today.
Yep. Thank you guys. We'll see you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.